Obsession and Backrooms are both considered huge hits, and a big part of the financial success is thanks to the fact that they were both made on very low budgets. So I think it's worth asking, are Obsession and Backrooms the new version of Hollywood B-movies? The term B-movie originated back when double features were a common practice in Hollywood. In the early 30s, when the Great Depression was making it a lot harder for people to spend money on entertainment, the studios introduced the double feature as a kind of 2-for-1 deal. Along with some animated shorts and a newsreel, audiences would get to see 2 movies all for the price of 1 ticket. But to make sure they were still making a profit, the studios had to make sure that these second movies could be made for cheap. So first you'd have the A-movie. These would be the ones that studios actually spent money on. They had top talent, and they were the movies that Hollywood actually figured people wanted to see and would show up to the theater for.
Keep your eye on that thumb, baby, and see what happens.
Got my eye on the thumb.
Then you'd have the B-movie, which was usually a genre film like a Western. The sets, props, and costumes could all be recycled from past productions.
I received your letter and got here as quickly as I could.
Good, boy. Now I'm going to tell you why I sent for you.
The stories were formulaic, and the movie was usually only 70 minutes long. All of this made it so they were very low cost. And this worked. The B-movies helped to keep the lights on during a time when revenues were low, and still allowed the studios to fund the big event movies that Hollywood was known for. But things changed by the 1950s. The US government declared Hollywood a monopoly and forced them to make big changes on how they distributed movies. And television was keeping audiences away from the theaters. Movies got longer, and the double feature faded away, but the term B-movie stuck around and was reapplied to low-budget genre movies. Instead of westerns, B-movies became sci-fi and horror movies. And the target audience was young people, especially ones going to drive-in theaters. And a lot of the time, the old reputation about B-movies stuck, that they weren't real art. Some critics still saw them as formulaic cash grabs that would get teenagers' attention with cheap scares and effects. They thought the characters were bland and the stories were simple. But some people started to notice that B-movies were actually the movies that were allowing some filmmakers to experiment.
I made him let it go.
Because they were low budget, they were less of a risk and had less oversight. Filmmakers had more freedom to make movies that were weird and pushed boundaries. These genre movies also got away with social and political critiques that would have been more difficult for Hollywood's A-movies to pull off.
And somebody or something wants this duplication to take place.
But when they're finished, what happens to our bodies?
I don't know. When the process is completed, probably the original is destroyed.
By the time we got to the 80s and 90s, the term evolved again, especially with the rise of VHS and DVDs.
Over $15 million at the box office, it's bound to be a monster hit on video. Get ready for Tremors.
Movies could have a whole second life beyond the theater, making these low-cost, campy movies even more appealing to studios, since they could become profitable through at-home media. We still use the term B-movie today, and it's usually just referring to a low-budget genre movie. But it's hard to know exactly what it means since the Hollywood landscape has evolved so much. What really constitutes a B-movie now and why the studios would produce them has changed. Some of the old B-movie trademarks still apply and some don't. So, are Obsession and Backrooms B-movies? One of the big similarities is that B-movies have always been defined by low budgets. Obsession was made for around $1 million and Backrooms for $10 million. A franchise horror movie like Scream 7 was made for $45 million. And bigger budget movies are typically between $100 and $200 million. Some huge blockbuster event movies can go even higher, like Avengers Doomsday's rumored $400 million budget. Another one of the similarities is that they're definitely genre movies. B-movies have always drawn people in with the promise of either action, horror, or sci-fi concepts. But if the earliest B-movies were seen as formulaic, I think this is where Obsession and Backrooms really stand apart. They've resonated with audiences specifically because they feel like something that wasn't standard. Some B-movies from the 50s onward were later seen as influential, pioneering movies, but they weren't sold that way and they weren't usually perceived that way at the time. But Backrooms and Obsession have been huge hits based off of word of mouth, and they're being sold as new and interesting projects from young, fresh, creative filmmakers. Arguably, the state Hollywood has been in for the last 20 years or so was to give the more formulaic movies the big budgets. Now don't get me wrong, I like superhero movies, but we can't deny that a lot of them, especially Marvel's brand, have often relied on a specific story structure and tone.
Good to be back.
Oh, this ain't gonna be good.
Movies that have appealed to audiences over the last couple decades were ones that had a familiar structure. So that's why we saw studios pouring money into remakes, sequels, reboots, and franchises. And for the most part, that worked. These movies made a lot of money. And generally, movies that were more innovative, weird, and pushed boundaries were given smaller budgets and limited releases. We saw the emergence of the prestige horror film, and arguably the same for sci-fi. These genres that used to be considered lesser were starting to get recognized even in elitist circles like the Academy Awards.
Wait.
And in just the last year, we've seen that continue with genre movies like Sinners and Weapons become Oscar nominated. And now this year, we have Obsession and Backrooms bringing in large audiences on shoestring budgets. So we can ask some interesting questions. How will Hollywood view these movies? Will these types of films become the priority for studios? Do they think the filmmakers are what's valuable? Will they continue hiring more YouTubers to become filmmakers and give them bigger budget projects? Or do they think the success is in the format? Does the innovation come with the low budget? Will movies like Obsession and Backrooms function like the B movies of the past, where they would be used to fund bigger budget blockbusters? Or will these become Hollywood's new bread and butter? So let me know what you think. I'd love to hear your thoughts and predictions on where things will go and how Hollywood's structure will continue to evolve.